Beloved soul, you've carried pain, you've whispered silent prayers in the dark, you've waited hoping someone, somewhere, would hear you. And today, heaven listens. In the next 5 minutes, I invite you to set everything down, your doubt, your fear, your burdens, and open your heart like a window to the light. For what you are about to receive is not just words. It is a bridge between your suffering and the sacred. This prayer, if you listen not just with your ears but with your soul, has the power to awaken what has been sleeping inside you, the miracle. Not because of me, not because of the sound, but because when a heart meets God in truth even for a moment, chains are broken, doors swing open, and tears become joy. You must know this: miracles are not loud, they are quiet like the whisper of the Spirit. They do not knock. They enter where faith has already opened the door. And they do not delay, they arrive exactly when your soul is ready. You are ready. In this moment, if you surrender fully, completely, with no conditions, then in 5 minutes your miracle is not just possible. It is promised, not by man, but by the Eternal One who never forgets a single cry of his children. So breathe. Close your eyes, let your spirit lean into this prayer. The miracle is already on its way. Let us begin. Faith is the soil of miracles. It is the silent force that prepares the ground of the soul for divine intervention. Just as no seed can grow in barren earth, no miracle can take root in a heart hardened by doubt. Faith is not merely a thought or a belief. It is a living, breathing surrender that allows something far greater than ourselves to begin its quiet, powerful work. In a world obsessed with control and instant answers, faith is the sacred pause that opens the door to the supernatural. It says, "I don't see the way, but I trust the one who makes the way." When the heart is filled with faith, it begins to move differently. It no longer waits for signs to believe, it believes, and then the signs follow. This is the reversal of the world's logic. The world says, "Show me, then I'll trust." But heaven speaks in reverse, "Trust and you will be shown." Faith isn't about pretending everything is okay. It's about knowing that even when everything seems broken, the hand of God is still writing a story of healing, redemption, and light. In that kind of surrender, miracles aren't rare. They are inevitable. Faith breaks the laws of fear. It dissolves the power of delay. It has the courage to stand in front of impossibility and smile, not because the mountain looks small, but because faith knows who moves mountains. It is not blind optimism or wishful thinking. It is not noise. It is quiet, confident surrender to divine timing and perfect wisdom. When you carry faith, you carry a key. That key does not always open every door instantly, but it unlocks the presence of God in every moment. And in that presence, the impossible becomes possible. The truth is, miracles do not occur in chaos. They bloom in order, in stillness, in the sacred tension between waiting and trusting. Faith creates that stillness. It stills the storm in the mind, even while the sea rages outside. It stills the questions, not by answering them all, but by making them irrelevant in the light of divine love. To live in faith is to let go of needing to know how and when and simply rest in the truth that it will be. Because God said so, because grace flows where faith is planted. People often pray for miracles but live in fear. They ask for signs but plant seeds of doubt. Then they wonder why nothing changes. But the soil was never ready. The soul must first become soft, open, and prepared. Faith is that preparation. It is spiritual oxygen. Without it, nothing lives. With it, even dead things rise. That's why so many who received miracles in Scripture were not the most powerful, not the most knowledgeable, but the most surrendered. The blind, the sick, the desperate, they came not with strategy, but with faith, and in doing so, they pulled heaven down to earth. You do not need to understand the full picture to walk in faith. In fact, faith thrives in the unseen. If you could see it all, it would not require faith, it would simply be confirmation. But God works in mystery. And faith is the heart's way of saying, even if I cannot see, I believe you are still good. Even if I don't feel it, I trust you are still near. That is the soil where miracles burst forth. Not in perfection, not in performance, but in pure, persistent, surrendered belief. Faith also has a fragrance. It attracts heaven's attention. It changes the spiritual atmosphere. It causes angels to move, doors to open, and burdens to lift. Faith doesn't wait for the miracle to start praising. It praises before, during, and even if the miracle doesn't come in the expected form. Because true faith is not transactional, it's relational. It isn't a bargain with God, but a bond with Him. And in that bond, the soul discovers that the greatest miracle is not just the answer, but the intimacy built in the waiting. Even when time delays, even when silence follows your cry, faith keeps the door open. It keeps the lamp burning. It keeps the altar lit. And when the appointed hour comes, and it always comes, faith is not surprised. It smiles through tears and whispers, "I knew you would come." Because the soil was ready, heaven responds to humble hearts in ways that the proud will never understand. It is not the strength of your voice, the eloquence of your words, or the prestige of your name that reaches the throne of God. It is the quiet bending of the soul, the silent lowering of the self. That sends tremors through heaven. Humility is not weakness. It is the most powerful position a soul can take before its Creator. It is the doorway through which divine favor walks, the language heaven speaks fluently, the atmosphere where miracles breathe. A humble heart does not demand, it does not accuse, it does not posture or pretend. It simply comes broken and honest, with nothing in its hands but trust. That kind of heart touches God because it carries no ego, no entitlement, no illusion of control. It doesn't approach prayer as a transaction, but as communion. It knows that it is not worthy, and yet it still approaches, not because it believes in itself, but because it believes in God's mercy. That kind of surrender is irresistible to the divine. When the heart is humbled, it becomes fertile soil for grace. Pride hardens the soil, making it impossible for love to grow. But humility softens the ground. It plows through selfishness, rips open the surface, and makes space for something holy to be planted. God does not resist sinners, He resists the proud. The one who sins and kneels in tears is closer to heaven than the one who stands clean in his own eyes, but far from repentance. Heaven is not moved by appearances, it is moved by truth, and humility is truth. To be humble is to recognize who God is and who we are not. It is to realize that without Him we are dust, but with Him we are vessels of eternity. The humble do not compare themselves to others because they have already looked into the face of the Almighty and seen the only standard that matters. That vision reduces every earthly title, achievement, and status into ash. Humility is not thinking less of yourself, it is thinking of yourself less. It is not self-pity or false modesty, it is clarity. It is knowing your place in the grand story, not as the author, not as the hero, but as the one who was rescued and given breath again. Heaven listens differently when humility prays. The humble don't shout to be heard, they whisper, and the angels stop to listen. Their prayers do not rise on the wings of pride, but on the tears of surrender. They do not bring long lists of demands, but short sentences full of love. Father, I need you. Forgive me. Have your way. These are the prayers that reach the highest heights because they come from the lowest places. There is something in the heart of God that runs toward the broken, the bowed down, the contrite in spirit. Not because they are perfect, but because they are honest. Jesus once said that the last will be first, and the first will be last. That wasn't a poetic metaphor. It was a declaration of how heaven works. God lifts the lowly and brings down the lofty, not to shame them, but to remind them that greatness in His kingdom is found on your knees. When we decrease, He increases. When we let go, He takes over. When we stop trying to earn love and simply receive it, transformation begins. Miracles don't come through prideful hands, they flow through surrendered ones, and a surrendered heart is a humble heart. The humble know that even the breath in their lungs is a gift. They are not entitled to another sunrise, another chance, another blessing, yet they receive all of it with thanksgiving. Gratitude is the natural language of humility. because the humble never think they deserve it. They are always overwhelmed when it arrives. That is why they walk in joy, even in trials. They have placed their lives in the hands of God, and they trust His timing, His ways, and His goodness. They don't demand understanding, they ask for peace. They don't demand control, they seek wisdom. They don't demand applause, they look for truth. Heaven draws near to such hearts, not because they are perfect or flawless, but because they are open. Because they are honest, because they do not wear masks, because they have laid down the armor of pride and picked up the robe of surrender. These are the ones who get to witness the impossible. These are the ones who walk in divine favor that cannot be explained. These are the ones whose prayers shake heaven not by force, but by love. The prayer is not magic, it's surrender. This truth pierces through the illusions that so many hold about what prayer is supposed to do. Prayer is not a spell, not a ritual, not a formula to manipulate God into giving us what we want. It is not a transaction where we trade words for blessings. Real prayer doesn't come from the lips alone, it rises from the soul. It is not about getting things, it's about giving ourselves. True prayer is surrender, not a surrender of defeat, but a surrender of trust, of will, of control, of ego. When we treat prayer like magic, we turn God into a machine. Insert your words, press your request, and wait for the divine vending machine to release the answer. But God is not a machine. He is a father, a king, a creator, a spirit. He is love, and love cannot be manipulated. Love responds to honesty, not to formulas. The danger of treating prayer like magic is that we begin to think we can twist God's arm with the right words or the right routine. We think if we say it 7 times or shout louder or cry harder, the miracle will be forced to appear. But that is not how heaven works. That is not how love works. Surrender is the opposite of control. It is the quiet laying down of our plans, our fears, our timelines, and our expectations. When we pray in surrender, we are not asking God to fit into our story. We are offering ourselves to fit into His. We are saying, I don't just want what I think is best. I want what you know is best. This kind of prayer doesn't always feel powerful. It's often whispered through tears. It feels vulnerable, exposed, uncertain. But that is exactly what makes it sacred. That is what makes it real. There is something deep within us that wants to control everything: our future, our relationships, our outcomes. But real prayer teaches us to release that control. It breaks our pride and opens our hands. It forces us to admit that we don't know what we're doing and we cannot fix everything. It reminds us that we are not God, and that is a holy realization. Because in that space, in that raw confession of helplessness, something beautiful happens. We create room for grace to move. We create space for peace to enter. We allow the divine to take the lead. Surrender in prayer is not passivity. It is not apathy or giving up. It is not sitting in silence, expecting nothing. It is active trust. It is saying, I will still ask, I will still seek, I will still knock, but I trust that whatever answer you give, it is good. And if you say not yet or even no, I will still believe that you are for me. That kind of faith is rare. That kind of faith is powerful. It moves mountains, not because we command them to move, but because God responds to a heart that has chosen to rest in Him instead of wrestling against Him. Prayer becomes holy when we are no longer trying to bend God's will to ours, but when we allow our will to bend toward His. It is not our passion that changes things. It is our position. A heart that kneels in surrender holds more authority than 1,000 lips shouting with pride. The angels are not moved by volume, but by reverence. Heaven does not open to entitlement, but to trust. And trust is born in surrender. Some people pray with a checklist, treating God like a distant employer, hoping that if they say the right things, they'll get their reward. But those who have tasted true surrender come like children. They come not to demand, but to be held. They come not to impress, but to be changed. They come with trembling hands and say, even if you don't do what I hope, I will still praise you. Even if the storm doesn't stop, I know you're in the boat. Even if the door doesn't open, I will worship at the threshold. This kind of prayer can break chains because it breaks us. It breaks the parts of us that rely on control, that cling to pride, that fight against trust. It breaks our need to understand everything. It breaks our addiction to outcomes. And in that breaking, we become open vessels ready to receive not just the blessing, but the presence of the one who blesses. The one who prays in surrender is the one who understands that prayer is not a shortcut to escape suffering. It is a lifeline to endure it with strength. It is not a wand that grants wishes. It is a weapon that defeats fear. It is not about magic. It is about relationship, intimacy, alignment, union. And when that happens, when we stop praying to get something and start praying to give ourselves, everything shifts. We no longer chase miracles. We become aware that the miracle has always been God Himself, not just what He can give, but who He is. And suddenly, prayer is no longer something we do to get an answer. It becomes the answer. It becomes the place where heaven touches earth and we are never the same. 5 minutes in grace can change eternity. Time, as we measure it, is linear and limited, counted in minutes, hours, and days. But grace lives outside of time. It is infinite, boundless, eternal. And when the two intersect, when a human moment is flooded with divine grace, the effects are not temporary, they are eternal. What we do with 5 minutes in the presence of God can echo in our lives forever and even beyond this life. That is the mystery and the miracle of grace. It does not require years of effort or hours of eloquent prayer. It asks only for an open heart, a sincere turning, a whisper of surrender. Just 5 minutes, 5 sacred minutes of honesty, humility, and yielding to the Spirit can realign the entire direction of a soul. The world tells us that change takes time, that transformation is a long and painful process, but heaven does not operate by earthly rules. One encounter with grace can do what decades of striving could not. In 5 minutes, grace can lift a burden you've carried for years. It can replace bitterness with peace, replace fear with courage, replace guilt with forgiveness, and it does so not because we earn it, but because we finally stop resisting it. Grace does not need our perfection. It only needs our permission. It waits patiently outside the walls we've built, and the moment we open the door, even slightly, it rushes in like light flooding a darkened room. In 5 minutes of grace, a soul that was lost can be found. A mind clouded by confusion can become clear. A heart that had grown cold can begin to feel again. There is no formula, no script. Grace is not a program to follow. It is a presence to encounter. And when it touches us, it doesn't just change how we feel, it changes who we are. It brings us back to who we were always meant to be. It restores what shame tried to erase. It resurrects the parts of us that life buried. It reminds us that we are not alone, not forgotten, not beyond repair. All of that, every drop of that healing and restoration, can begin in 5 minutes, but those 5 minutes must be real. Grace does not fall on masks. It does not pour into hearts that are closed in pride or bitterness. It enters where there is honesty, where there is stillness, where there is hunger. It meets us when we stop pretending and finally say, God, I can't do this on my own. And we don't have to speak those words out loud. Sometimes the tears say it for us. Sometimes the silence says it. Sometimes a deep breath and a breaking sigh are all it takes for heaven to lean close. When the soul bows low, grace always comes. It never hesitates, it has no limits, it does not hold our past against us, and it does not consult our record before it redeems. It is not delayed by our doubts or weakened by our failures. It simply flows quietly, powerfully, patiently into the cracks of our brokenness. Some people spend their whole lives chasing purpose, searching for meaning, trying to find something that will give them peace. They search through noise, through distractions, through everything the world offers, and still they come up empty. Because peace is not found in the world, it is found in grace, and grace is not a place, it is a person. It is the presence of the one who made us, who knows us, who calls us home. And when we step into that presence, even for just 5 minutes, we realize that everything we've been looking for has been waiting for us all along. Grace is a divine interruption. It stops the cycles of guilt, the spiral of anxiety, the weight of condemnation. It speaks a better word over our lives. It tells us, you are not what you've done. You are not what was done to you. You are not too far gone. You are still loved. You are still chosen. And once the heart hears that voice, truly hears it, nothing is ever the same. 5 minutes in grace can undo years of lies. It can silence the inner critic. It can break generational chains. It can bring light into the darkest places of the soul. And from that moment on, you carry something different. You carry the fragrance of heaven. You carry peace where there once was panic. You carry hope where there once was despair. Grace doesn't just touch you, it marks you, it sets you apart. It awakens a hunger for more, and long after those 5 minutes are over, the ripple effect continues, transforming the way you see, the way you speak, the way you live, and the way you love. Because 5 minutes in grace is not just a moment, it is the beginning of forever.